Arizona. Then we drove to Vegas, friends of mine, and drove to Vegas and came here. And the very first time I was ever in California, no, that was my first time, 77. My second time was the Grand Clay. And Winoka Rashidi had a presentation at Compton College. And they invited me to speak. That was my very first time. That was, and then my second time. That was 86. So, Elder, I think we sort of kind of changed the way we're going to do this.
Okay.
And just have since your good friend came to bring books to you, I'm sure he sat and spoke with you and just had a nice kind of conversation. I think we'd like to have that one because it seems like this is going to be the way it is. So let's have a nice conversation. You know, a conversation we might not have.
So, we showing anything or video?
So we don't need that now.
If you'd like to record this, I'll follow your lead. You're more than welcome.
Oh yeah. I mean,
we don't. I guess we have a change in format of these.
Okay.
Since I came with
the mic's on top of the. Let's crack a mic.
Pass it around.
Feel free. Yeah. Awesome.
And that all
right. Find one inside.
Yeah. Listen, that's what I'm vibing on. I really like this. I really like this place. I really like it.
Thank you.
It's really very comfortable. You can feel the spirit.
Yeah, we are very blessed.
We are blessed.
The spirit is within us.
Yeah. Phenomenal.
Oh, that's us. Oh, where that music coming from? Anytime. Let's just talk like we were talking. Bev?
Shall we have an introduction of our guest? We're here on a Saturday afternoon, November the 23rd, I believe.
Yeah.
And at Krst Unity Center of African Spiritual Science, and having a wonderful discussion with two wonderful men who are true spiritual beings who have something to share that's powerful and enlightenment. And we're here to share as a group because we recognize that all of us have something important to share as well. And so we give thanks for Dr. Kaba and Dr. Varmah. And we'll know their names soon, as all of you will, as they move through the world, bringing enlightenment.
I'm Erica Bird. Okay. Peace and blessings. I'm Shauna.
Namaste and peace and blessings. My name is Brother Marcus Banks-Bey. Brother Kaba.
Brother Varmah.
I'm Karen McGee.
And the year is
2013.
You know, what I had come to really talk about, knowing Dr. Varmah, and Doctor and I have done various presentations, and we really
hit it off well in terms of going back and forth with our presentations. And knowing that Dr. Varmah focuses in on the Atenist and the Aten concept, my presentation is geography and history and how to teach Akhenaten to our children, and also to blend it with the study of the sun, understanding solar power. Because in the world that we're living in today, there's going to be a new energy that we're going to have to visit. It is obvious that our ancestors were aware of solar power just because of the structures that they built and the purposes that they serve. So what I always attempt to do, I'm part of the Board of Ed in New York City. I graduated. Some people call it retirement. I call it graduation in 2009. And what I've been doing is visiting places to do staff development and curriculum development to assist those that are interested in bringing this information, this African-centered information, into the school where they teach. I don't really focus on the public school system. I focus on schools that might call me in. There are principals in the systems that are very interested in doing whatever they can to bring it in. But for the most part, the system itself, I don't believe they have the interest or the potential. But my purpose is to take this Aten text and to demonstrate it in a way that we might be able to apply it in the classroom. And if by chance, now that I'm going through this process, if by chance did the gentleman leave or be, because I have a projector presentation that I'd like to give, and if I could just, or if that can't be done, then I'll just talk it through because I know it by heart. But I really have come to talk about the educational process, how to teach Akhenaten, but more importantly, to teach the 18th dynasty. Because you can't teach Akhenaten, it would almost be teaching a very important concept in a vacuum. You have to understand where he came from. You have to understand what brought the 18th dynasty in and what the 18th dynasty did. A family that held power and sway and development for over 250 years. I'm very concerned with dates, so I don't get too caught up in dates. But the dates that they give us and the dates that I think that when I look at ASCAT, the organization, when I look at the work that Asa Hilliard, Dr. Nana before gave us, and when I look at the work of Runoko Rashidi and others, they do have timeline. And so for the sake of chronology, I use that timeline simply to place us geographically and historically in text. But the 18th dynasty, they say, was somewhere between, it ruled sway for 250 years. Somewhere between 1570 to about 1320 BC. So you're talking about 250 years of one family being able to keep things in a consistent way, which is just so powerful. And at the end of this so-called dynasty, we are now going to have this individual, Amenhotep IV, come into power and is going to do certain things. But what's so important to understand is that he did not create the Aten concept that was around for a very, very long time. In fact, the people he referred to were the ancients to him. So really my main thing is to bring it into the classroom, bring it into centers that have schools and children, and to focus on solar power. Because that solar power is going to be what's going to bring us out of this dependency on all of these artificial ways. And so that's what I'd like to share. Back to Ra. We came from Ra. It's just a matter of going back to Ra. It's like a child who is sustained by his mother. That is what Ra does. Ra feeds us, sustains us, nurtures us, because that is where we come from. Just like a child comes from mother and father, we come from the sun. Back to Ra.
For myself, as Elder Kaba has stated, we are trying to address from the educational standpoint of the Atenist text and from the religious standpoint how to apply it, how to actually live by the teachings found in the Atenist text, how to live what they refer to as Atenism or Atomism, or some rarely say at oneism, being at one with the divine source, the universe, with nature. when we look at the Shabaka stone, which I know Elder Kaba will speak on, I make it my responsibility to address the language, because language is key. Somewhere along the line, languages were lost. Tongues, as we were invaded or colonized or kidnapped or subjugated or enslaved, languages were lost. And those languages hold a key as to who we are and our relationship to divine and our relationship to those original scriptures before Alexander and Constantine and Empress Irene and King James and so many others got their hands on it and rewrote it and tore pages out and burnt up other pages and added their mythology and their Olympians to it. If we look at the Shabaka stone, I like to look at the word Shabaka, the actual word, where we find Shu, Ba, Ka. Shu being the divine wind. Those Shu was also a principle of a seat, that in each generation, the person amongst us, and they had a female and male counterpart, all of our ancient elders or elements or attributes or deities or guardian angels, depending on who we're speaking to, all of them had a masculine and a feminine principle, because it was understood that you cannot separate the feminine and masculine principles and have life. Just from the plug in the wall, if you break off one prong, whether it's the feminine or the masculine prong, that light won't work. If we go out to our car and we disconnect the feminine or masculine cable to the battery, the car will not work. And so too in the human body. If we were to be hospitalized or something happened to where our heart wasn't beating properly or stopped beating for that matter, and they had to use a defibrillator, there are two prongs, a feminine and a masculine prong. So these two principles that on the wall we have the arch guardian or archangel or high guardian or high god or master of writing wisdom and scribe Tahuti, or some call him Ta. The Greeks tried to replace him with their Greek god Hermes. When we look at Thoth, we find, or Tahuti, we find the double helix. Some call it the caduceus, the cadus, the medical center. These two directions of light, which I heard my elder speak on last night about the brain stem, the medulla oblongata, because they acknowledge that this principal seed in us, when we consume food and we chew this food which will be the earth portion, goes into our bodies, into our stomachs, and are digested, they seep through the small holes in the small intestines and the stomach called lacteals. And they enter into the bloodstream where they are fused with the oxygen. The oxygen is the Amun principle, O8, the eighth element, the eighth deity, Amun. And this fusing causes a combustion, what they call blood pressure, in the bloodstream. And the solar plex, that sun principle, which my elder spoke of last night, that sun principle in us as melaninite people, because our actual melanin souls or melanin cells, neuro and neuromelanin, both nerve melanin and skin melanin, brain melanin, actually utilizes the sun. It utilizes the sun principles. All of us as children at some point went outside on the grass with no shoes on our feet, and we looked up at the sun with our eyes closed, and we felt this warmth on our skin with no fear of skin cancer, melanoma, no fear, because of the gift of melanin that we were given. So this solar plex, when it is ignited, when it comes in contact with the sun, which is why they've created this westernized culture of being out of the sun, in buildings with no windows, called supermarkets and factories and office buildings, in cubicles with no contact with the sun, artificial air, to keep us from being in contact with Ray, with Ra, with the source. And when this food would spontaneously combust, Those nerves from the solar plex would wrap around the back to the spinal column and travel up in that double helix to the brain stem where it bit and then sprung out to 12 what they refer to as occult nerves. Some call it 12 disciples of Christ, or 12 companions of Muhammad, or 12 students of Buddha. And these 12 tribes of Israel would then, these 12 occult nerves would stimulate and activate the various centers of the brain. So that's Shabaka, or Shu, wind, Ba, soul, divine soul, Ka, divine spirit, because we have a double portion of the spirit. And the Hebrews use it as the Chayim. They say Chayim, Chayim, Chay, life, Hayat, life, Yim, Yam, waters, but the dual life. So they called it the Chayim, which they got from the Cha of ancient Africa, the Cha, the Chat, the divine body that holds that divine spirit, because we acknowledge that we are not a one-fold being or a two-fold being. We are a nine-fold being. We are body. We are soul, body. We are spirit, Ka. We are etheric body, that electrical current that runs through us. The etheric, the Akh. We are the Hati, physical heart, which has a counterpart on the scales of Mat called the Ab, the spiritual component. In Islam, they refer to these two hearts. They'll say one is the physical heart, they'll say Ab, or Qalbi, my heart. And then they have another heart that they refer to as the inner heart. So the ancients acknowledge these principles, that the Shabaka stone guides us back, these principles of Mat, which they took to call the coming forth by day, or the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and then they call it the Book of the Dead, we call it the coming forth by day. They only call it the Book of the Dead because they found it in all of our nebunks, our sarcophagus, where our arms were folded over like the great angelic guardian, or high guardian, or deity, or God, or personification of divinity, Asaru, or Osiris. So as my elder and I are speaking, we're going to address the educational aspect as to how to bring this Atanist doctrine, this true religious identity. How do we get our people to embrace the true religion that we had as a people? Our religion. And Judaism, Islam, true Judaism, Hebrewism, was a part of it. True Islam, the peaceful Salam, was a part of it. True Christianity, or Christianity, was a part of it. And how do we get back to teaching it to our children? Because, as we know, it's not about just teaching you and I. For our birth date is quickly approaching, the date that we expire out. But if we don't figure a way to present it to this next generation where they can live it and not be labeled cult, heretic, brainwashed, which are really all good terms. Cult, culture, heretic, hierophant, high priest, high priestess, brainwash, which is a blessing. With all the dirt that they've added to our brains, we need some brainwashing. But so that they'll be able to live the way our ancient relatives and ancestors and guardians and descendants live. And that is what I believe we are here to share today.
You know, it's interesting when I was listening to Reverend Varmah talk, and I was thinking about the classrooms that I've been in. Again, going back to my experience in the New York City Board of Education. The First World Alliance, blessings on Sister Kefa and our ancestor, Brother Bill. I was part of that from when Dr. Ben was the only speaker, going back to the late 70s. And I remember then Dr. Clark, and there was a time that they had the Harlem School of Africana Studies that was next door on 145th Street, and I used to attend those classes. And I remember they began to expand their classes. and they started to invite other speakers in. That's when I was exposed to people such as Dr. Naeem Akbar and Dr. Francis Krst Wilson. But somewhere in 81, 82, I was a kindergarten teacher, and I was going First World Alliance, and you see, there was always that system. So I never sat down because that church was filled to the brim every Saturday, 4 o'clock. Vendors out in the street. I mean, it was an African holiday every Saturday. I remember those sessions that ran for years, and I remember there were sisters that used to sell soup outside, and there was a brother by the name of Reggie and his wife Lottie who had Tuck-Rama books out of Piscataway, New Jersey, and that is where I first got my Xerox copy of Anacalypsis. I got my first copy of all of Gerald Massey's work. I mean, this was Xerox, and he had this big thing, looked like almost you walked into a library. And if he didn't have the books themselves, he had the Xerox copies of them. This is where I got a hold of these books. And I remember that there was this one Saturday, and I used to ride my bike because I didn't live far. This is on 145th Street. Numerically speaking, the Mount Zion Church was 145th Street and Convent Avenue, and I lived on Columbus Avenue and 95th Street. So just looking at the division, I wasn't far away. I used to jump on my bike and I used to ride up, and I used to tie it to a pole, and I had my tape recorder. But when I would go in, I never sat down because it was a custom that whenever the place was filled and a sister walked in, some brother had to get up and let the sister sit. So I figured, before I get comfortable, let me not even just sit. I'm just going. And every Saturday, I was in the back left-hand corner of this church. And I had my tape recorder, and I used to tape. And this one Saturday, brother by the name of, this is the first time I'd ever met him before. His name was Dr. Richard King. Dr. Richard King came to talk to us. And he spoke about something called melanin. Now, I've already been a teacher now. I started in Gary, Indiana in 1977, but I started in New York City in 1979. So I've been a teacher a couple of years now. I'm a kindergarten teacher. I believe I know something. Having studied our history, our culture, I believe I know something. But the brother was using the word that I had never heard in my life. The word was melanin. I had never heard of that word in my life. And I remember that I must not have been the only one. Because he said, okay, brothers and sisters, let me put it to you like this. If you can understand plant photosynthesis, then you can understand human photosynthesis, because the chlorophyll is to the plant as the melanin molecule is to the human body. The chloroplast is the chlorophyllian cell to the plant as the melanocyte is to the melanin molecule in the human body. That opened up a door for me. And I've often told my good brother Dr. King that he opened me up to this curriculum that day. Because I went to the back, and if you remember, he had his black dot 1, black dot 2 in Xerox form. It had a blue back, right, and a transparent cover. And I went back and I bought them both. Each was $5 a piece. I bought them both. And I got on. I put in my backpack, and I got on my bike, and I went home. I put those 2 pieces away. And the reason why I put them away was because I knew that I was not ready to understand what they said. But what I did for the next 2 weeks with my kindergarten class, I taught plant photosynthesis. And in the back of my mind, I knew that I was going to make a transference from plant photosynthesis to human photosynthesis. But what I needed to do was to go to what I knew, which was plant photosynthesis. I've been teaching plant photosynthesis to 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds now for 3-4 years, because as a kindergarten teacher, you teach all subjects for the most part, minus maybe when you get a break. It's, somebody comes in and takes your class. And so I was with the class all day long. And so I got our little eggshell, egg cartons and our little milk containers. I had them all. Make sure you bring your milk container back. Don't throw it away. And they had their little milk container, and we bought the soil, and we bought the seeds, and we started this process. And the whole time what I'm doing is that I'm looking at every facet of plant photosynthesis, trying to make the connection to the human photosynthesis. He said chlorophyll, melanin, chloroplast, cell. Now I'm looking at xylem and phlegm tubes. I'm looking at things that deal with plant photosynthesis, knowing in the back of my mind I'm going to do a transfer filter. We get it done. We put our little plants in the window, and then I go get his work. And what I begin to do is and I took extensive notes while I was doing this with the children. I then took his work, blacked out one, and I began to make the comparisons. Still didn't study it. I was just making comparison. I was writing column A and column B, and I was making connections between. And as I was going through this process, I began to realize that I could do this with every subject that exists and with everything that we teach the children. Because as you know, our good brother here, I believe he's in California, Dr. Wade Nobles. Oakland? He's in Oakland? Okay. I remember, genius brother. I mean, I just take his work, particularly his essay in the proceedings of the Atlanta Conference of the Infusion. He has an essay in that book entitled Content and Intent, the infusion of the curriculum. And I remember he told a story. It was very interesting. I'll never forget it. And I often tell it because he likened our experience in the classroom to vomit. That caught my attention to that man. Yeah, I mean, that's what I said. But it was effective. Remember, he's a psychologist now, so he knows how to use his words in the mind to catch your attention. He said, because the reason why it's vomit. He said, but you got to analyze it. He said, you're not going to eat it, you're not, and I'm saying, oh, come on, you don't have to go through all that time. Don't have to eat it, don't have to, the smell is bad, everything about it is bad. However, in that vomit is the original meal. And he said that when those outside of Africa came in and sat at the feet of the geniuses of Africa, they did not have the intellectual enzymes to be able to digest what they were learning. And like all things that are too rich for your system, reverse peristalsis occurs. They vomited it back up, but that in that vomit is the original science and math and language and all the essences. And he said, now what we have to do is that we have to take with fine-tooth comb, we have to examine that vomit and see what the meal was. And then we got to cook it again because we do have the intellectual enzymes to digest that. And that's what I've done these years of my life with the assistance of Professor John Henry Clark, who I give credit for much of my development in the work that I do. And so I've done that with all of the subject areas. And that's why it becomes important that we don't throw it away, because the one thing that I came to realize in that examination over these years is that there is no such thing as an African-centered curriculum. Because when African people taught it, the only people in the room were Africans. The reason why we have to call it African-centered is because someone stole our legacy and put their name on it. So for us to be able to research, rescue, and restore our legacy, we now have to say it's African-centered to be able to connect with our relational learning, to understand that this is ours. What we're learning in chemistry is ours. Last night when I was in San Diego, Sister Shamala Shango of Sacred Science Studios invited me to speak at the World Beat Temple. I call it a temple. I told her Sister, I told Sister Makeda, I cannot call this a center. This is not a center, this is a temple. And I encourage anyone who may not have been there, if you're ever there, you need to visit Sister. And we need to start making connections with each other. This is why I find it so exciting that not just that Dr. Varmah and I would do these types of presentations together, but it's that we have to unite ourselves. And as speakers who go around, we have been places. I was in Wilmington, Delaware a few weeks ago. There is a place called LJ's Playpen. It's an African-owned building of a young African-American couple who have developed a school. I brought my son, Heru, who is 19. And they took us on a tour of this building. And what Heru remarked to me is every room we go into is bigger than the room we were in before. He has a movie house in that place where he has, for instance, he has a Friday night is men's night where there's food, where men come of the community who talk about the issues facing men of African descent, the real serious issues that we face as men. Not the ones that we try to overlook, not the ones that we try to add. And what the brother does, LJ, what he does is he brings out of them, and he has food, and he'll show a DVD, and they'll watch a DVD, and then they'll talk about it. He has a movie house that actually shows movies where there are roles where they come in. Now, this is in Wilmington, Delaware. I had never known this place existed prior to a couple of weeks ago. And I make it my business when I visit places such as the Krst Spiritual Center to let you know this exists. Just as when I go back, I tell them about the Krst Center. Because sometimes with what we're doing, we think we're alone, and we're not alone. There are a lot of oases in the desert of intellectual ignorance. And I just want our community to understand that there are folk doing great things. When Doctor and I were together in Jacksonville, we were at a masjid where these brothers and sisters are attempting to do very serious things with the community. And it becomes important that we know that we're not alone in this. And with the technology that we have, we can zoom right in. People can zoom right into the Krst Center. You can zoom right into LJ. Tonight, you can see what that place looks like. You know, you can see the World Beat Temple and what's going on in San Diego, and in Fresno, the African American Museum, and also that other place that we were at where they had the museum, but the place named after that gentleman, Cecil. Remember, you took me where I spoke to the students, where you take me in the multiple intelligence. The Hinton Center. Okay, they have a little charter school in there. And when I walked in there, they had a senior citizens program on, where the seniors were coming on. And I came in with my red, black, and green jacket, and there was a sister there that had a blonde wig. She said, "Don't let this blonde wig fool you, honey. I know what them colors mean." You know, I mean, this is, and they were eating, they were watching television, the seniors were coming together and talking. Right there in Fresno, California. This is what's happening here in California. Hinton Center. And is run by African people, paid for by African people. It becomes our responsibility, those of us who travel, to come and let the community understand that not only this information has its place, but there are other places that are doing this. There are other places where I'm going. You can go to Wichita, Kansas. And there's a community there that is very serious about the work that they're doing. And they invited me to the elders meeting when I went there. And these elders sat there. And, you know, really what they did in many different ways is what all great elders do, is that they check you out. Okay, you coming into Wichita, but what you about? Okay, we've been here for a while. We've seen everybody come and go, but what you got? What makes you special that you brought? So the brother that brought me there, I sat and I presented myself to the elders. This is Wichita, Kansas. I mean, I could go through the line of places that I've been, that I've seen things, that our people are doing great things. But we got to unite this concept together. And we have to connect, and we have to know each other, because although we may have a session where 20 people show up, if there are 20 people where 20 people show up, now you got 400. And so you're not as alone as you think you are. And please also, this is interactive. Please, if anybody would like to talk or whatever, this is what it is. But I just like to please.
As I told some of you, we were in Kansas City, our home, where we did the memorial services for my brother. But the Sunday before, a young man came with his sister, moving his sister to L.A., and he lived in Kansas City. Now, Kansas City is a great, beautiful place, but it looks like a freeway went through the middle of it, and the people emptied out. And it's just, I look around and I see from what used to be a quiet desperation in the people. And then the young man told me he was from Kansas City, and informed me that there is a small group, 10 folks, young people, who are meeting every Saturday night on these teachings, and it just made my heart happy, you know. And then to hear your recollection of all the other places that are taking place, it feels good to be able to say we are not alone.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And you know, that's good to know also, because again, now you've shared with me 10 people who are doing this. And it's happening as we speak. There are many places in the country today that are doing exactly what we're doing right now. And it's so important that we understand. And when we are able to connect, and when I'm able to go places and tell people about the Krst Center and about what's happening here, it becomes very important. Because the information that Dr. Varmah has shared with me, and looking at our 10, that's a phenomenal science class. With what he has said thus far, and with what I've learned about melanin, and with the importance of understanding the relationship of the role that melanin plays as it relates to the sun, that's a science lesson. And you deal with the integumentary system. The integumentary system is your skin, your fingernails, your hair, everything that's outside, everything that touches the sun is called your integumentary system. And in your skin, you have you have the epidermis, and you have the dermis. In your epidermis, you have 5 stratum, or 5 layers. Stratum corneum, stratum luciderm, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, and stratum basale. This is what we should be teaching our children in biology class, as we're breaking down the systems of the body. But you teach it relating it to melanin and the role that melanin plays. And the analogy I use is like taking a class on auto mechanics, but never learning the role of gasoline in the car. You know all the parts of the car. You know how the car runs, but you don't know what makes it run. You know your respiratory system, your circulatory system, your excretory system, your reproductive system, but you don't know what makes those systems run, and it's melanin. In the bottom 2 layers, in the spinosa layer and the basal layer, you have a biochemical known as 7-dehydrocholesterol that settles right in that area. And as the sun comes down and kisses your skin, the 7-dehydrocholesterol brings the light and heat energy down into your skin. And the 7-dehydrocholesterol converts inactive. See, everybody talks about vitamin D, but nobody tells you there are 4 different types of vitamin D. There's vitamin D1, D2, inactive, that's in your skin. D3, D4 doesn't exist. What 7-dehydrocholesterol does, it takes that light and heat energy and it converts the inactive D1, D2 into D3, D4. And that is what we talk about when we say your body needs vitamin D. Your body needs vitamin D, but your body needs the sun. So when Brother said when we was out in the sun looking up there never worrying about melanoma, we were out in the sun because we understood what our tune would do for us. And when we teach this to our children in the classroom, we're teaching our children, remember the vomit we talked about? Well, now we're recooking the meal. And we're presenting it to the children in a way that they can intellectually digest what it is that we're saying, so that they understand what melanin is. And just as Richard King schooled me, so too is what we need to be doing into the schools and bringing this into our classrooms.
Dr. Varmah.
As we bring it into the classrooms, we have to acknowledge, as my elder has said many times, that our people respect 2 classrooms. Or know of 2 classrooms, I can't say respect. The school and the place of worship. The church, the mosque, the synagogue. Under this Western indoctrination, unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation where they'll say separation, church and state. A doctrine that is adverse to atomism or the atomist text. Because in our original ways, there was no separation of the church and state. The church, or the spiritual, ran the state, and the state was a part of that spiritual system. The what they say is the oldest recognized church as far as Christianity, Euro-Christianity is concerned. They'll say it's the Catholic Church. They'll say. Because we know the Alexandrian school of Alexander the Greek, they had the Greek Orthodox, theirs was called Hellenism. But let's, for the sake of the discussion, just stick with what they say. They being the so-called scholars. They say that the Catholic Church has the church, they have Catholic universities, and they have Catholic hospitals. Because they are looking at our original African precepts, they understand that there is a place, that triad principle, which in Africa or Kamene we have as Atum-Re, and Amun-Re. The 3 points of the visible ray, because there's a hidden point called Anu-Re, A-N-N-U, the Nun, the primordial. But the 3 visible points which they'll have as a rising sun, and in Tamare or in ancient Africa, we drew it as red, gold, and blue. 3 points of the visible spectrum. So when we look at the education, as we're reaching the youth, so too is my elder also telling us we must reach the elders in the churches, in the mosques, in the synagogues. And how do we take the microcosmic original sciences and now introduce it to the macrocosmic of the religion? How do we take the hospital doctrine, which is the first doctrine, the matriarchal principles of science, earth sciences and things of that nature, the original laws of nature, gravity, levity, etc. And now how do we now look to what they're calling religion and see in it the science, the religion, and the university. The university. Why called the university? Where we must study the universe. They took us from studying the universe and our relationship to it as a manifested celestial being, meaning everything is happening in the solar system is happening in our body, and is happening in the galaxy, and is happening in the greater universe, in the boundless universe. They took us from studying the universe and our relationship to it, and just said religion. And then say, before any scientific formula can be approved, religion must say it's okay, in some way, form, or fashion. The religious moral majority of the country today is determining what's going in our textbooks, which my elder spoke of last night, where they're saying now it's no longer slavery, it's involuntary immigration. That's what they're putting in the textbooks.
Involuntary.
That's coming out of Texas, the moral majority, because it's supposed to be the largest public school system. The new textbooks coming out will say no longer slavery. We weren't kidnapped. We weren't enslaved. We involuntarily immigrated. So as we look to the religion, we must find where these sciences, because science, a true scientist must be a religious man, and I don't mean by their definition of religion. And a true religious man must be a scientist. See, they want to separate science, true science, from religion, true religion. There's a story that's told amongst the Africans in Kamene. They said the discussion is being had between a scientist and his friend. And his friend says the universe was created by a divine source. The scientist turns around and says, no. The universe just came forth out of nothing. The religious man says, well, what is your definition of nothing? Do you mean nothing as in put? Or do you mean nothing as in no, N-O dot thing? the number or the summation of things. That things come about by other energies, components, gases, formulas, chemicals, interacting with each other under the governance of universal forces to bring them about? Or do you just mean the way religion of today teaches both? His friend said, well, I believe that God merely said, exist. And things just happen. The religious African scientists said, yes, Ta did say, exist, Ka'un, Kun, and into existence things came through time and age, not put. So the overly, blind faith religious individual went away. And the friend who remained, the scientist who had a true religion, said, I'm going to create something. So he made a replica of the solar system. A beautiful replica. I mean, everything was to precise precision. Its relationship, the sun, the moon, the stars, the asteroid belt, everything. And when his friend returned the next day, he saw this magnificent structure and he said, wow, who made it? The African spiritualist said, no. He said, come on. No lie. Who made this? He said, no, really. No one. He said, why are you toying with my intelligence? Who made this magnificent structure that you're showing? He said, I woke up, I came in here, and it was just here. I said, well, you're insulting me. It's impossible for this to just be. I said, but if you believe that it's impossible for the replica to just appear, yet you believe that which is being replicated, it's a replication of that you believe came out of nothing. Needless to say, the friend converted and understood that there is a source that places a portion within all of its creation to manifest. The Europeans would later steal it and attribute it to Isaac Newton. So it's a conversation we had with his friend. It is an African teaching of Imhotep converting a friend who had lived in a foreign land. They rewrote it. Isaac Newton takes the credit. But when you research it, you find out it wasn't Isaac Newton. Now, why do we say that? When we are traveling the world, and I say we, the elder said it to me yesterday, and Sister Shamala, we were discussing it, we speak in we. Why do we say we? Sometimes people say, well, because I am a summation of all of my ancestors, relatives, friends, families, books, DVDs, CDs, all of the experiences. We are a summation of all that we have seen, heard, tasted, smelled, and touched, consciously, unconsciously, and superconsciously. Three minds working. Subconscious mind, the conscious mind, what we consider to be the aware mind, which is more lack of awareness. Right? The subconscious mind, the mind that's recording everything, and then that superconscious mind, which is the mind that after you've tried to remember what you have forgotten and are going about your day, it never stops researching the files, and all of a sudden, an hour later, that's what I was thinking. You are a triune being, these 3 points. And the Bible and the Quran, which they admit, are in the incorrect order. Which is it's a funny thing. I've spoken in seminaries and say, you teach us that the Bible is in its incorrect order. The books of the Bible are not in their correct order. You tell me that according to the chronology of the Bible that you have, that the book of Job should be after the book of Exodus. You tell me this. I said, yes. So why is it so difficult every time we're revising these books to just put them in their correct order? The Muslims do the same thing. They'll say the Quran was revealed to Muhammad, and the first book given to Muhammad was a chapter of the separation of cells. But yet when I open the Quran, I find the first chapter is the chapter of praise or the chapter of the opening. I'm confused. You're saying you want us to understand our relationship to Allah or Jehovah or God or Adonai, but yet you're admitting that the books that you're given to us are not in their correct order, and yet you know they're not in their correct order, and yet you say you know the correct order, but you don't want to put it in the correct order. Because perhaps it would tell us. Perhaps it would show us the Africa from which it was taken. See, if I read Genesis, and I just say Genesis, let's just say Genesis. I say, well, what does that mean? I say, it means the beginning. It means the beginning. That's what they'll translate. But if I look closely at it, I see genealogy. Genesis. Genealogy of Isis. A story talking about a family line. They say, well, I find that to be far-fetched. Right? Then we ask the question. You tell us about two families in the Bible, if I may. You tell us about two children, most specifically. Cain, Abel. And you tell us that they were the children of Adam and Eve. You don't tell us what Adam means. You don't tell us what Eve means. I look in the Hebrew, I find Eve is not there. We put Eve, evil, subliminally, woman, evil, woman ate apple, that old Greek story. But when I do look there, I find the word Nakeba in Hebrew. And it means tribal leader in Hebrew. Why were you calling this female tribal leader if it was only her and her husband? If I look up the name Adam, I found Adam, or we find that Adam is not an individual because the Bible says male and female created he them and called their name Adam. So Adam is not the name of the male, it's the name of the species. Life, dam, lifeblood. Congealed blood. If I take blood and set it out and it dries on some paper, eventually it granulates like dust. The Muslims take their first book, Surah Al-Qalam, chapter of the congealed blood. But in the Hebrew, I find this name for Adam, I find the word zakar. Zakar. To remember. Who's naming these two people? Rememberer and tribal leader. These two people didn't have children. They had two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain, in the Hebrew, you say Kaba. You say it means Kayin in the Hebrew also, Kaba in Latin. It means javelin. Kayin, javelin. Kaba. Keeper of grain. Then they turn around and tell us Abel. Now I want you to say Abel. Say it for me. Can you spell it, please? A-B-E-L, right? Tell me what you see and not what we told you it's supposed to sound. Abel. Because if I say Abel to a baby who's learning spelling in school, he would say A-B-L-E. I'm able to do this. So you taught me Abel, but I'm looking at Abel. And if I said Abel, I would be saying Ab, father, like Abraham, father. Il, father of God. Well, how could Abel be the father of God? And where do the Africans relate to this? Where do we find ourselves? And this Cain, of Gaim, javelin, kills the older son, kills the younger son, Abel. When we get to Africa, we find the oldest son, Asaru, is the keeper of flock, the good shepherd. His counterpart, not enemy, not rival, there was no rivalry. It was the understanding of the two directions of life. His counterpart, Sotuk, was the younger. See, what they did was they made Cain the older and Abel the younger. When Asaru is the Abel, Abel, father of Haru, father of God, because Haru is appointed to human beings, he becomes your Seth, your replacement. These were our stories. The Bible, as we're reading it, is telling our story, but because of Loga, in the beginning was the... So because of words, the play on words, the play on language, education, which is what we're working to do, what you've been working to do for how many years now? To force our people to relearn who and what we are. Not based off of what someone told us. What our sciences are. Not based off of what Einstein or Tesla or anyone else says it was supposed to be. To not look at Egypt as pagan. Now, if you mean Aegyptos, thank you. Aegyptos, Egypt, pagan. Burnt Greeks coming in Aegyptos. But if you mean Africa, Tamare, those who acknowledge the Ta, the Ma, and the Re, the earth, the waters, and the source, and that wind that we all all through our Bible, they said Jesus blew on his disciples, the wind. They said his Hebrew name was Yeshua. He was of a family line of Shu, those who understood the power of the divine breath. And then Jupiter and Zeus started. So, again, the religion and the education must cover the youth and the elders and everyone in between. And then we can address the psychology with Dr. Umar Johnson and Dr. Francis Cresswell and Dr. Miranda Andrew, who I call our babies, our Coptic popes. We said Coptic. You mean like Coptic? Well, Coptic is what the Greeks tried to call it. You mean like Coptic? The word Coptia, say Coptia, just means the central, the access. Africa, as she's called today, or he's called, because the land is Africa, the planet is mother. Right? Africa, as it's called today, was the Coptia. Was the cup, the center, the cup, the navel. The center of us all is our navel, the access point. So we are Kupti. Are we Krstian? Is there a difference between Christian and Krstian? Yeah, Christian are those who are the anti-Krstian. Those who want us to worship Jesus. Say it again. See, the Romans had their high interpolation of God as Jupiter. Jupiter. What is Peter? Father. Jupiter. Father of the Jew. The image of Jupiter is blonde hair, blue eyes, with a beard. The Greek manifestation which preceded the Romans was Zeus. Say Zeus. Now say Jew. Jew, J-U, Roman. Zeus, Greek. Now say Jesus. And that's who they have us worshiping. So is there a difference between Christian and Krstian? Christian says patriarchal society. Father first, Adam, man first, Abraham first, Jesus. Yes. Krstian says Ka. Rest. Ka, divine spirit. Rest. Hebrew. Rosh. Arabic. Rais. Head. Krst. Head. Spirit. But then they made a mistake. They said Kanisa, or the Israelis call it the Israeli Knesset. But they didn't want to tell us, what is Nisa? Nisa. Kanessa. The spiritual center, the female, the matriarchal system of religion. The divine mother holding that child who is the head. She is the spirit and the child is the head. The divine mother, the black Madonna. And these are the things these are some of the things, I dare not even say these are the things. These are some of the things that all of us that are traveling, we spoke earlier, the elder and myself, and I mentioned our conversation yesterday about what is consciousness. And we were talking this morning and saying, one of the things we might want to look into is how to take all of these places in Delaware, here in Los Angeles, Fresno. Yesterday we were in San Diego, in Tampa, in Rock Hill, South Carolina, in London, England, the different places that we travel around the world. And we have to figure a way where we have certain types of amulets that people must travel to these different places and sit at the feet or next to or in front of or stand before yourself and before Dr. Melinda Amby and before Dr. Francis Krst Wilson and before Dr. Kaba Kamene, all of these different places, and pick up pieces of this amulet, which once you've completed your travels, you hold the master's feet. If we can figure out how to do that, whether in this lifetime or the next, I think it'll be a good thing. And that's where the education is.
Comments or questions, please?
I have a question. The microphone.
I have a question as it relates to Akhenaten, 18th dynasty, Kuptia, and the cults, the Coptic Church, right? Can you all, I guess for lack of better words, give us a timeline or where that started? I'm using timeline for lack of better words, but we know that there was a beginning in why Akhenaten relocated to Amarna or Amarna, and what did that look like, and what was the purpose, and how did it transition into the cults, which is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, if I'm understanding that correctly?
As my beloved elder made very clear, dates, Greco-Roman calendar, Chinese calendar, Julian calendar. Let's first look at this word dynasty. Dynastos, Greek god, Dynastos. So that right there tells us someone's involved. The way the ancient Talmudians looked at it is much. Let's just take America. America has how many states? 50 today.
But more importantly,
Okay, well, that's why I said 50. In Talmud we had nomes or sipat, states. Uras, rulers over each state, and then the authority over the whole land. If I go to the 13 colonies in the Americas, or in the United States of America, I find that the older your colony, the older your governor or ruler of that state. In other words, New York could be in its 40th governor, and Hawaii might be in its 22nd governor. And Florida might be in its 38th governor. But the 28th, 38th, 52nd are all living simultaneously. And this is a part of the game that was played with the dynasties. They're not telling you that many of these ancestors of ours were contemporaries of one another. They want us to believe that it was like Akhenaten dies and then it's Tutankhamun and he dies, and then over here is Thutmose the First and then he dies. And instead of realizing we had governors, or Ura, females and male Urites, who were ruling in our respective nomes, as they refer to it, or sipat, as we call it, sipat, where we were ruling simultaneously. And all of our border nations, all of our nations on that African, what they're calling continent, that had ocean borders or had land masses like going up through Egypt over into what they're calling Palestine, Israel, Canaan, on up, we were fighting against invaders. Whether it was in front with Shishon and his wife Koroma, or later Hannibal, or later Shaka Zulu, or Thutmose the First, or Amenemhet the First, or we were constantly fighting because everyone wanted, whether it was those from the land of Sin, from the Ganges, and I'm not talking about the Harappan civilizations of the Indus River Valley. That was us. We had no problem. That was family. The very word Harappan tells you who they were into. Haru. That's who they were. But we're talking those who went to the Ganges, the Indo-Aryans, who created this caste system and subjugated those of the Indus River Valley. We had no problem with them. But those from the land of Sin, these Indo-Aryans who came in with their caste system, came into Kamene and introduced certain things, namely the worship of animals. The literal worship. I will starve as I watch a cow walk by. People are starving in parts of India watching a healthy cow walk by. Now, I'm not saying you should eat meat or you shouldn't eat meat. I'm saying if you're starving, the African principle says starving food, eat. Very simple. Yes? But they brought in the worship of certain animals and took Hathor and replaced it with Kathmandu. So by the time Akhenaten comes in, and Amenemhet the first, and Thutmose the first, second, and third, and Hatshepsut, or Hatshepsut, and Ahmose and Kamose, all of these who were contemporaries in and around the same time, they said the same thing. We have to get the invaders' doctrine out of our lands. The Greeks came in. We talked about yesterday. You go to the Vatican their website, and type in the Vatican search engine, statues of Anubis. And they show you this alabaster, white-washed statue of Anubis and Thoth and Isis, but they're whitewashed, wearing togas. Please don't. Check it out. And this is what he and Thutmose and Hatshepsut and all of the other greats were trying to push out. By the time we get to what you're saying, the Coptic church of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, they say they trace their roots, that's our family, coming from James, the brother of Jesus. But we got to make sure we know we're not talking Jesus, Bible, European interpreted eyes, but this Krst child, who every 30 years they take a tour to show the world, Tutankhamun, who was born Tutankhaten. Now some Egyptologists will say Tutankhamun died at 13. So how could he be the real living Yeshua of 2,000 years ago? Because our ancestors, our angels don't die. They personify in each generation. So the principle, the precept, we find in Isis in every generation. We find in Asaru in every generation. We find a Tahuti in every generation. It's not like our angels die, because energy is not lost nor destroyed, but simply transferred from one body to the next. So they say, well, King Tut died at 13, right? I said, yes, all African boys and girls died at the age of 13. It's called the coming of age ceremony, where the child is put to death and the woman or man is born. So when the child Tutankhaten was put to death, the man Tutankhamun was born. And you're confusing the African ritual, which the Maasai, say Maasai, I say I put it together. Right, which the Maasai tribe says the conquering lion of Judah. You go on Google Images and type in Maasai wearing lion's head. All Maasai men and all Igbo men, part of my family, when we turn 13, you and your best friend, this is a real best friend, you believe this, are sent out to hunt a lion. That's a best friend. That's some good friends. I don't have many best friends. And you don't come back until you have become a man. And then from that day on, every time they gather for the ceremonies, you wear the lion's mane. And you're taken through a ritual of being stood up. They call it the opening of the mouth ceremony. And you're raised in degrees. And you're stood. Freemasonry, Europeans grabbed it and they raised it. That's us. It's us, but it's not us. It's us because they took it from us. But it's not us because they got us confused. They added a whole bunch of degrees that have to do with Greek pronunciation and German pronunciation. So the Kuptia, the access is what we are, the Rel Sugwat. All of these 9 degrees are the 9 principles, or the 9 spirits of the Messiah, if you need to hear it that way. The Coptic Church is a part of who we are, but even they, through time, have been somewhat corrupted. Because it got lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter too. So almost now where if you say black, they don't know we're not black. We're Ethiopian. There's Ethiopians who will tell you they're not black, they're not African. I know for a fact, been there. There's Sudanese who have sat within Sudan, in Omdurman, and to Nubian, black, and a Muslim. No, I'm not African. African? No, I'm not African. Black. I'm not that stuff. I'm Muslim. Oh, dude, you're darker than me. You make me look light, and you're telling me you're not an African. And this is why we must reclaim who we are. We must. This is a star. This is an elder. This is our doctor. This is an elder. This is a scholar. This is our doctor. We're not going to the Egyptologists of European descent to have their approval as to our dates. Don't need it. Don't care. I don't care what Sir Richard Burton the 15th of the Royal College of London. I don't care. His accent doesn't impress me. And it shouldn't impress any of us in this room.